This is the podcast that will change the way you handle every conversation for the rest of your life. Because today, I'm going to reveal 7 psychological power moves inspired by Niccolò Machiavelli and Carl Jung, moves that will help you dominate any room, disarm your loudest critics, and command respect without ever raising your voice. These aren't tricks, they're weapons. And once you know them, you'll see the game for what it really is, and you'll never play it the same way again. So lean in, listen closely, and imagine this. The next time someone tries to put you on the spot, you don't flinch, you don't defend, you control the entire frame with a single deliberate move. That's the calm predator mindset, and by the end of this episode, it will be yours. You know the moment. The meeting is on fire. Voices are climbing over each other. Someone just threw a jab, maybe at you, maybe at your work, and all eyes turn your way. Your heart spikes, your throat tightens. Instinct screams, defend yourself, explain, prove them wrong. And that's the trap, because the second you take the bait, you're no longer in control. You're playing their game, on their terms, under their rules, and they know it. I used to walk straight into that trap. Every single time. In college debates, in job interviews, at family dinners. I thought quick explanations made me look smart. They didn't. They made me look shaken. Then I learned something from 2 men who understood power better than anyone, Carl Jung and Niccolò Machiavelli. They taught me the mindset of the calm predator, the man who never chases approval, never reacts on impulse, and still, always, walks away with control. In the next few minutes, I'll show you 7 moves that make people hesitate before challenging you. Moves that flip the power without raising your voice. But first, let me tell you about the day I learned the most important 3 seconds of my life. It was 2018, Monday morning. I was in a boardroom, pitching a project I'd spent weeks perfecting. Halfway through, a senior manager leaned back, smirked, and said, "Are you sure this isn't going to crash and burn like your last idea?" The room froze. Eyes swung toward me. My brain went into overdrive. Say something, defend yourself, prove him wrong. I opened my mouth. And then, I didn't. I just sat there. 3 seconds. Long enough for the air to get heavy. Long enough for him to shift in his chair. Long enough for everyone else to wonder what I was about to say. And when I finally spoke, it wasn't defense. It was a question. What do you see that makes you think that? His smirk faded. He fumbled for words. The room started looking at him instead of me. That's when I realized those 3 seconds weren't silence. They were a weapon. Here's the truth. Most people panic-fill silence. They rush to justify themselves. But the calm predator doesn't fill it. He lets others drown in it. And once you master those 3 seconds, you stop chasing control and start owning it. The beauty of those 3 seconds isn't just in slowing the moment. It's in watching the balance of power tilt without lifting a finger. Think about it. When someone attacks you, they're betting on speed. They want to knock you off balance, keep you reacting before you can think. They're counting on your ego to take the bait. But the second you pause, you flip the script. Now, they're the ones hanging in the air, wondering what's coming next. They can't read you. They can't rush you. And when people can't predict you, they start to respect you or fear you. I've used this in arguments, negotiations, even at family gatherings. Once, an uncle tried to embarrass me in front of everyone at Thanksgiving. I looked at him, cut my smile in half, and let the silence stretch just long enough for someone else at the table to say, "Wow, that was unnecessary." I didn't have to defend myself. The room did it for me. That's the hidden law here. The man who speaks last speaks from a position of strength, and the man who can wait almost always gets the last word. Which brings us to the next move. Because holding your fire is only half the game. The real kill shot comes when you take their frame and turn it against them. See, silence buys you time. But time alone won't win the game. You need to decide what to do with it. That's where the frame flip comes in. Most people, when challenged, step straight into the other person's frame. Someone calls their idea unrealistic, and they immediately start explaining why it's not. But explanation is submission. You've accepted their premise. You've let them be the judge. A few months after that boardroom moment, I was in a strategy meeting. A colleague leaned forward and said, "This plan doesn't feel grounded in reality." Everyone turned toward me, expecting the usual PowerPoint defense. Instead, I tilted my head and said, "Interesting. What would you suggest instead?" And just like that, the frame flipped. Now, he had to defend his idea. The room's attention shifted. His voice got tighter, and I sat back, calm, watching him burn energy. That's the secret. Don't fight inside their frame. Build your own and make them live in it. In a minute, I'll show you exactly how to do it, so you can turn any accusation into their problem, not yours. The trick with flipping the frame is simple. Don't defend. Redirect. Imagine you're playing chess. Your opponent makes a move, expecting you to respond in the narrow way they've prepared for, but instead, you move somewhere completely unexpected, and suddenly, they're the ones scrambling. That's what a frame flip does in conversation. I remember a client pitch in New York. Halfway through, the CEO interrupted. "I'm not convinced your numbers add up." Most people in my seat would have jumped into an anxious explanation, rattling off figures and charts. Instead, I leaned back, locked eyes, and said, "What do you see that I don't?" Silence. Then he started explaining, point by point, why he doubted the numbers. And as he spoke, I realized something. His concerns weren't about the math at all. They were about a risk his own team hadn't solved yet. By flipping the frame, I'd pulled his hidden agenda into the light without confrontation. That's the power here. You stop being the accused, and you become the judge. The beauty of this move is that it works anywhere. Boardroom, bar, even at the dinner table. Last summer, I was at a backyard barbecue. The music's playing, drinks are flowing, and out of nowhere, a friend grins and says loud enough for everyone to hear, "Man, you're always so full of yourself." The old me would have laughed nervously and tried to explain, "No, I'm not. You just don't get," which, let's be honest, would have sounded exactly like someone full of himself. Instead, I sipped my beer, smiled, and said, "Funny. What makes you think that?" Now he was on stage, and as he stumbled through half-baked examples, people started exchanging looks. Within a minute, someone else changed the subject entirely. Frame flipped, target neutralized. And here's the best part. When you make them define their own accusation, they often realize it's weaker than they thought. The frame flip isn't about winning an argument on the spot. It's about shifting the weight of proof, making the other person carry it. And once you see how effective it is, you start spotting opportunities everywhere. That co-worker who always throws little digs in meetings, flip it. The friend who teases you just to get a reaction, flip it. The stranger online trying to bait you into a fight, flip it. But here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes you don't even need to flip the frame. Sometimes you don't need any words at all. You let the attack hang in the air, long enough for it to start feeling heavy, long enough for everyone else to wonder why you're not reacting. And when you do that right, you make them talk to themselves. That's not just control. That's psychological warfare. And it's our next move. 2 years ago, I watched a VP of a Fortune 500 company get called out publicly by one of his own team members. It was in the middle of a quarterly review. Charts on the wall, executives around the table, and this guy, clearly frustrated, said, "Frankly, I think your leadership style is outdated and holding us back." The room froze. Everyone expected the VP to fire back, defend his record, maybe even shut the guy down. But instead, He just sat there. 10 seconds. No frown, no smirk. Just steady eye contact and complete stillness. By the 6th second, the attacker's voice wavered. By the 10th, he was backpedaling. I mean, it's just... Maybe there are things we could modernize, that's all. And here's what hit me. That VP hadn't just avoided a fight. He'd made the other man argue against himself. That's the essence of silence as a mirror. You reflect their own energy back at them until they can't handle the sight. You don't need a corporate title to use this. Last Thanksgiving, I was sitting at the dinner table when a cousin decided to take a jab. "You've changed, man. You're not as fun as you used to be." The younger me would have jumped in, defending myself, explaining how I'd been busy, how I'd grown up, how I hadn't really changed. But instead, I looked at him, raised one eyebrow, and kept cutting my turkey. No response. Within seconds, the silence got awkward. My aunt shifted in her chair. My cousin started to ramble. I mean, not in a bad way, just, different. And then, almost like magic, someone else changed the subject. Here's what happened. Without me saying a word, the weight of the comment bounced back onto him. He became the one scrambling to look reasonable. That's the beauty of this move. It's not about not speaking. It's about making your silence louder than their words. Silence, when used right, is not absence. It's pressure. It makes people replay their own words in real time. And most of the time, they hear flaws you don't even have to point out. That's why the calm predator doesn't rush to speak. He lets the other person fill the space, over-explain, and in the process, weaken their own position. But here's the thing. Silence isn't always enough. Sometimes you need to close the scene with a single, precise line that ends the game right there. Not a defense, not an apology, a strike. A line so short, so sharp, that it leaves no opening for them to come back. That's the next move. And it's one you'll want in your pocket before your next confrontation. The first time I saw a real signature strike, it was in a crowded downtown bar. A guy at the counter tried to impress a group by taking a jab at someone he barely knew. "Man, you act like you're the smartest guy in the room." Every eye swung to the target. Most people would have laughed it off or tried to explain themselves. But this man? He didn't flinch. He took a slow sip of his drink, set it down, and said, "Then maybe you need a different room." Boom. Conversation over. The group laughed, not at him, but with him. The jabber looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon. That's what a signature strike does. It doesn't defend, it doesn't argue, it ends. And the key isn't just the words, it's the calm delivery, the timing, the way it feels like you've been saving that line for years, even if you just thought of it. A few years back, I was consulting for a tech startup. During a team meeting, one of the senior engineers, known for being blunt, looked right at the COO and said, "You're way too optimistic. It's like you don't even see the risks." The room went still. Everyone expected a back and forth, maybe even a heated argument. Instead, the COO leaned forward, clasped his hands, and replied in a steady voice, "If you only see risk, you'll never see opportunity." That was it. No raised voice, no bullet point defense, just a clean strike that flipped the dynamic. The engineer didn't respond. He just looked down at his notes. And the rest of the meeting moved on, with the COO firmly in control. That's the magic. A signature strike doesn't just win the moment. It reinforces your position for everything that follows. Here's the thing about a signature strike. It's not just a clever comeback. It's a controlled blade. If you use it too often, you look defensive. Too early, and it loses its punch. But when you hold it until the perfect moment, it hits harder than a 5-minute speech ever could. The calm predator doesn't fire every arrow in the quiver. He waits for the one shot that matters. And here's where most people fail. They're so focused on what to say, they ignore the deeper battle, the one happening inside themselves. Because you can't deliver a clean strike if your own emotions are pulling the trigger. That's why the next move is all about knowing your own weak spots, before anyone else can use them against you. The most dangerous ambush doesn't come from across the table. It comes from inside your own head. Years ago, I watched a high-level merger meeting between two companies. On paper, one CEO was the obvious favorite: more experience, bigger portfolio, stronger numbers. But halfway through, the other side's negotiator dropped a casual remark. "You know, some people are saying your last big acquisition was a disaster." In an instant, the confident CEO changed. His shoulders tightened, his voice rose, and he launched into a 5-minute defense of his track record. He thought he was fighting the other man. He wasn't. He was fighting his own insecurity, the one about being seen as reckless. That's what Carl Jung would call your shadow, the part of you you don't want others to see, but will do anything to protect. And once someone finds it, they own you. The calm predator studies his own shadow first, so no one else can turn it into a weapon. You don't need to be in a corporate war room to have your shadow exposed. A friend of mine, calm, witty, unshakable, completely lost it one night over something small. We were playing cards. Someone joked, "You always get lucky, never any skill involved." It was meant as a throwaway line, but my friend snapped. He launched into a mini lecture about strategy, probability, years of experience. His voice got louder. His face went red. That one comment had pierced something deeper: his need to be respected for his intelligence. That's the thing about your shadow. It's not always obvious, even to you. It hides in your reactions, in the way certain insults stick longer than they should. The calm predator spots those patterns early and diffuses them before anyone else can light the fuse. Here's the hard truth. If you don't know your shadow, someone else will find it for you, and once they do, they can lead you anywhere they want, simply by pressing the right button. That's why the calm predator does his shadow work first. He writes down his triggers. He studies the insults that get under his skin. He learns to spot that first spark of heat rising in his chest and snuff it out before it shows on his face. Because when your shadow no longer controls you, you become harder to provoke and much harder to predict. And unpredictability is power. Which brings us to the next move, one that's as much about what you don't do as what you do. A move so subtle, it makes people feel your presence, even when you're not in the room. Sometimes, the loudest move is no move at all. A few years ago, I was working with a senior advisor during a tense multi-company negotiation. Everyone expected him to be in the final meeting, the make-or-break session where terms were decided. But when the day came, he didn't show up. No message, no explanation. The room buzzed. People whispered, checked their phones, speculated. The other side's lead negotiator, clearly unsettled, kept glancing at the empty chair. By the time my advisor finally walked in, 45 minutes later, everybody was leaning forward, waiting for him to speak. And when he did, he spoke less than anyone in the room, but every word landed like a hammer. That's the power of absence pressure, making people feel your influence more in your absence than your presence. You don't have to be in a high-stakes boardroom to use this. A friend of mine was in a group chat that loved to argue. Politics, sports, whatever got people riled up. Normally, he'd be right in the middle, firing off points, trading jabs. But one week, during a heated debate, he read every message and said nothing. By day 3, people started tagging him. "What do you think?" By day 5, they were DMing him directly, asking if he was upset or if he agreed with them. His silence had become the center of the conversation. When he finally replied with a single, measured sentence, it carried more weight than anything else that had been said all week. That's the point. When you remove your voice from the noise, people start leaning in to hear it again. Absence. Pressure works because it shifts the balance of attention. When you're always available, your presence is taken for granted. But when you disappear, strategically, people start to measure the silence. They wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning. and whether they should adjust their own moves before you return. Machiavelli would call it withholding the sun so they feel the cold. Jung would say it's creating space for others to project their own stories onto you. Either way, it builds anticipation. And anticipation is leverage. But here's the catch. Pressure alone isn't enough. If you vanish and reappear without a strong presence, the effect fades fast. Which is why the final move is about building something that speaks for you before you even open your mouth. Your aura. A few years ago, I attended a high-profile charity gala. Hundreds of guests, loud conversations, clinking glasses. But when one man walked in, the energy shifted. He didn't rush to shake hands. He didn't speak right away. He moved slowly, making eye contact with just a few people, offering a faint, knowing smile. Within minutes, people were turning toward him without realizing it. Conversations paused as he passed. He hadn't said a single word, but the room already knew he mattered. That's aura, the silent authority you carry everywhere. It's built in the way you stand, the pace you move, the expression you hold when no one's speaking to you. And here's the thing, aura doesn't appear by accident. The calm predator crafts it, protects it, and projects it, so that before a challenge ever comes, most people decide it's not worth making. I once worked with a project director who never raised his voice, never rushed his words, and never seemed rattled by deadlines. When he entered a meeting, he didn't immediately jump into the agenda. He'd take a moment, adjust his chair, open his notebook, glance slowly around the table. That pause wasn't wasted time. It was a signal. I'm in control of the pace here. Over time, people began to anticipate his opinion before he spoke. If two teams were arguing, they'd often stop mid-sentence when he leaned forward, waiting for him to deliver a short, decisive statement. And when he did, the conversation usually ended right there, not because he forced it, but because his aura made people trust, sometimes fear, that his word was the final word. That's the kind of presence the calm predator builds, one that commands the room before the first syllable leaves your mouth. Aura isn't about perfection. It's about consistency, the way you walk into a room, the way you hold your gaze, the way you react when someone tries to provoke you. Each of these moments adds another layer to how people perceive you. And over time, that perception becomes your shield. You won't need to defend yourself, because your presence already tells people it's not worth the risk. Machiavelli would say you've built a fortress without walls. Jung would say you've integrated the parts of yourself so completely that nothing rattles your center. And when you reach that point, every move you make, every word, every silence carries more weight than 1,000 arguments. That's the final form of the calm predator, a man who wins not by fighting harder, but by making it clear that fighting him is a losing game from the start. 7 moves. The 3-second freeze. Buy yourself time and make them feel it. Frame flip. Turn their attack into their burden. Silence as a mirror. Let them hear their own weakness. Signature strike. End the exchange with one clean line. Shadow awareness. Know your own triggers before anyone else does. Absence pressure. Make your presence felt more when you're gone. Aura maintenance. Build a presence so strong, most challenges never even happen. None of these are about being louder, or angrier, or winning every argument. They're about making sure the game is always played on your terms. Jung taught us to master the self so no one can pull our strings. Machiavelli taught us to master the field so no one can control the game. Together, they form the mindset of the calm predator, a man who doesn't chase control because he already owns it. Now it's your turn. This week, pick one of these moves and use it. See how people react differently when you don't give them what they expect. And when it works, because it will, come back and tell me in the comments. I want to hear your wins. If you want more strategies to sharpen your psychological edge, hit subscribe. Because in the next video, we're diving into 3 psychological traps that make powerful people fall and how to avoid them. Until then, control the tempo and you control the outcome.